Your Highness, Excellencies, Ministers, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the WISE special session on innovative financing for education to achieve the Millennium Development Goals. The theme of today's session is extremely important because improving education access and quality is a topic that concerns us all. In the context of the current financial crisis, the international community will have to use all available resources for education in more effective and innovative ways. At a time when developed countries are running deficits, new sources of financing and investing in education must be created. Your presence here today is to exchange ideas, share best practices in order to reinforce and coordinate current efforts and to identify the most useful and realistic ideas and help develop them into concrete initiatives. To guide the discussions around this important topic, our panel of distinguished personalities includes Her Highness Sheikha Mouza bint Nasser. Her Highness is known to uphold quality education, which is for her the key to unleashing human potential. She is a leading advocate for education and a relentless campaigner for children's and youth right to quality education. Through her work as a UNESCO Special Envoy for Basic and Higher Education and as a member of the MDG's advocacy group, Sheikha Mouza has brought worldwide attention to the plight of out-of-school children, especially those living in areas affected by wars, conflicts, and instability. Her contributions make her an inspiring leader in a region where women still struggle to take risks and make an impact. Ms. Carol Bellamy. She's a tireless defender of children's rights, and currently she's the chair of the board of directors of the Global Partnership Fund, previously known as the Education for All Fast Track Initiative. Ms. Bellamy previously served 10 years as executive director of UNICEF. Senator Cristóvão Buarque. Senator Buarque is a former Minister of Education in Brazil. He is behind the successful implementation of conditional cash transfer schemes for education in Brazil, and currently he is a senator in the Brazilian National Congress. Ms. Rita Roy, she's the president and CEO of the MasterCard Foundation, an independent private foundation based in Toronto, Canada. The foundation advances innovative microfinance and youth learning strategies to promote prosperity in developing countries. I would like to inform you that this event is being live streamed through a website, WISE website, and will be receiving questions through Twitter, #WiseMDG. We will also receive questions and ideas from the audience. As a reminder, we have only 1 hour, 10 minutes left to this session. I would like kindly to ask the panelists not to exceed 5 minutes per intervention, and when the floor is open for discussion, also I would like your intervention to be under 2 minutes, please. Now we'll hear an introduction about our topic from the expert moderator of this panel, Mr. Nicholas Burnett. He's the Managing Director of Results for Development, and he's a member of the Task Force on Education of the leading group on innovative financing for development. He previously served as Assistant Director General for Education at UNESCO. The floor is yours, Mr. Burnett.
Thank you very much, Your Highness. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. We are here, I think, to discuss a very small portion of global financing on education, but a very crucial portion. Globally, something like $2.5 trillion actually is spent on education. But the international flows, aid and other types of flow for education are something around 14 billion. Only 14 out of that whole global 2.5 trillion. But that 14 is pretty influential and could be, as I hope we shall discuss, a lot more influential. Now that 14 actually breaks down into 2 elements. About 12 billion of official development assistance, which comes from donors, bilateral donors. And about 2 billion that comes from everywhere else, which are donors who are not recorded through the OECD Development Assistance Committee mechanism, which are corporations, of whom I see several in the room, which are private foundations, such as the one that Ms. Roy heads. And so the very interesting question, I think, is what what further role might that 2 billion play? And indeed, is that 2 billion a big enough number? Well, one can think that that new sources of finance and new mechanisms for cooperation internationally might want to do several things. One, of course, it ought to raise resources. And there is certainly need. The Education for All Global Monitoring Report, which looks at the financing needs simply for basic education in low-income countries, estimate a global annual gap of something like $23 billion just for that. That's clearly the MDG-related part of this session. But that's not all. The flows which already exist, the aid flows which already exist, less than half of them go for basic education. Is that the highest priority? Does enough go to Africa? Does enough go to countries with great difficulties, particularly those in or emerging from conflict? Does enough go for effective things? Does enough, in the context particularly of this conference, does enough go for innovation? And I would say the answer to all of those questions is no. And the solution to that is the influence of the other 2 billion, which I think we will probably want to agree should be more. So one of the important questions is how can these new and at this point relatively small sources of international finance not only do things themselves, but also influence the existing aid flows. How might they do that? Well, first of all, they of course should not be subtractive from the existing flows. So any new mechanism shouldn't be reallocation of money from an existing mechanism. That would not increase the net flows. Secondly, they need to, I would argue, increase the profile, the international profile of education. Because one of the reasons that, say, education does relatively poorly compared to health in terms of international flows has to do with that international profile being lower. Another reason, and this is something which these flows might also wish to do, is that the education is perceived wrongly, I would argue, as a result of being at this conference, but it is perceived, like it or not, as not being a particularly innovative sector. Whereas, say, health, again, is perceived as being extremely innovative, and of course, in some ways, is more open to technological innovations, such as new vaccines and that sort of thing. However, I think that these are the sorts of things that these new sources and new partnerships that we are going to discuss today might focus upon. And we can already see this beginning to happen. We see a big increase in aid from non-DAC donors. China, Brazil, beginning from South Africa also. We see aid from foundations increasing into education, but frankly nowhere at the level of the health sector, and partly because there's no one big donor, which there is in, one big foundation, which there is in the health sector, the Gates Foundation. We see increasing corporate flows. An interesting publication recently in the US indicated that something like $500 million comes from US corporations into international education. And we see all these things beginning. The question is, how can they be better stitched up? How can they expand? And how can they influence those other more traditional but terribly important flows? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burnett. And now I will turn this first question to you, Your Highness. 2015 is approaching, and we all know about the circumstances right now. The world is facing the international financial crisis and some unexpected instability, especially in the Arab world. All of this is slowing the process that you have been all working on. What can we do to make faster progress in achieving the MDG goal in education?
I wish I know or I can answer this, but I guess we are gathered here today to discuss and to brainstorm and find ways and means to accelerate our progress towards education. But one of the ideas that I have is really to rethink our approach towards education and start to look at education as something that's not just affecting our lives in terms of educators, but also our lives in general. It's a macro problem. It's not just a micro problem. So we need really to tackle it in a more comprehensive way. One of the ways that really I think it might be valid to look at and examine, to see it as a business case. So we have to look at on a more business-like way. So we should set our business plan through defining our focus target. Then through this target, we have measurable outcomes and promote our case in a way as a business case. Then assess our outcomes according to certain KPI. So dividends are clear to everyone, among them business sectors, because I think the business sectors are the most affected sector by the outcomes of the education, and they are one of the end users. Actually, they are the main end users of any outcomes of this educational systems. So it's important for us really to revisit our approach, to rethink our way and methodologies toward education. It's important for us really to be more creative, more innovative in education. I believe in innovation education. I believe that education should be a dynamic sector. It should be always and flexible, adaptable, according to the needs and requirements of every time and every era.
So what we're doing basically today, we are doing our feasibility study for education.
If you want
Your
to,
Highness.
if you want to put it this way, yes, it should be a feasibility study and should be examined according to certain KPIs.
And how do we choose a priority for this area?
Well, you are touching very sensitive issue here and very close to my heart. I know that the problems are really board, but one of the pressing problem when it comes to education and how can we meet the target of the MDG2 is really the conflict countries. Those children who are living in areas with conflicts or emerging from conflicts, they create or they constitute 2/3 of our target, the population target of the MDG2. So can you imagine if we can address this lost population, we'll be able to tackle and achieve 2/3 of our population. I think this is very important because it will lift them from the miseries and the poverty that they are living in. It will also build their nations and will insert the culture of peace and reconciliations. Those countries are at the most need of such culture to look forward and leave the past behind them. So it's important really to look to these categories of population as priorities for our target.
Thank you so much, Your Highness. Ms. Bellamy, my second question is for you. The reforms and new direction of the Fast Track Initiative, now Global Partnership for Education, provide more flexibility in terms of fundraising and management of funds. Can innovative mechanisms of financing make a real contribution in assisting developing countries to mobilize additional resources for development on a stable, predictable, and voluntary basis?
Well, I suppose the answer is yes, but my view is that there is more talk behind innovative financing and too little talk about financing for innovation. And I mean, there are groups that meet and they talk about debt swaps and private equity funds and they point to health and they say, well, look at all the innovative financing in health, but in fact, it hasn't been very innovative. It's been bonding and it's been taxes. But there needs to be more attention to financing for education. I mean, Senator Barkey's cash transfer, which has been around now for quite a while, and then there are many models, was a better utilization of existing financing that had an impact on getting children into school. And so I think more that's not to say we shouldn't be looking for various financing product, if you will. I'm not against that, but I think there's too much hope being put into this is going to fill the coffers, when in fact, in the long run, I mean, the majority of financing for education will always come from domestic governments. But financing for innovation, that's where we should be looking. So we should be taking not only the $2 billion that was referred to in the beginning, which I agree, and needs to be more than it is at present, and look how better to use it. I don't think it's only a question of more money. It's how you use the money and how you use it in ways that actually bring children into school. And Her Highness is right. I mean, if you're talking about out-of-school children, the great majority of out-of-school children are in conflict areas. And so again, because those systems are at this point very fragile, how you utilize the funding is really the approach that we need to be taking. That's what makes, in my view, this conference very important, because we're actually talking about innovation rather than send more money. If we had the innovation, we could use the money better.
So what I understand, Ms. Bellamy, there is no new ideas, maybe new concepts. Is this what you're trying to say?
Well, there are always new ideas, and I think there are new ideas in financing, and there's new partnerships.
Yes.
I mean, for too long, in my view, the education sector has been a bit allergic to engaging with the private sector, and now we're starting to see more private sector partnerships in education. I think that's very important. It's not only that. For much longer, the health sector has been prepared to. So there are new ideas. I'm not sure in the financing product, frankly, we've gone much further than taxes and bonding at this point, and maybe that's as far as we go, and that might work. I know Nick's working on a venture fund, but it's a venture fund. We all know about venture funds. It's a venture fund for innovation, and so my view is let's identify the innovation, and that can help us better utilize the funding.
Thank you, Ms. Bellamy. Senator Buarque, there's a very good success story in Brazil, and you personally contributed in the educational system in your country. Can you tell us more about what you did in Brazil to get good results in education?
Yes, thank you very much for being here. Hi, Highness, all others. We had a very successful effort in bringing children to school, but we did not have yet bring equality to school. What we did was to find a very obvious way to bring the children to school, to pay poor families, since they have all children in school. We started that theoretically in 1986. I was the rector of the University of Brazil at the time. When I was governor of Brasilia, it's a small state in Brazil, where is the capital, I started this program. 5 years, some years after that, President Zedillo of Mexico put this project in all Mexico, and very, very successful. I would like to say that President Zedillo's project was more successful than mine, even because he put together education, health, and nutrition and food. After that, President Cardoso put the project all over Brazil. And today, after President Lula, we have 12 million families receiving this allowance. This is very important for education, but it's very important for the economy also. It's a kind of social productive Keynesianism. Keynes recommend to pay to create a demand. We are creating a demand, but we are producing something special to the social project. What? The attendance of children. but we need a lot more. And in the short time I have, I'd like to say that we have to change our mind regarding education. Education has to be seen not as a problem to be solved by the governors, presidents. No, education has to be seen as the solution to our problem today. Even this global financial, economic, ecological, and social problem, education is the solution. And I think that if we have this commitment, it's time perhaps to do now for education what the world did after the Second World War for industry, for economy. Perhaps we need a kind of Marshall Doha plan for education in the world. We need some money to transfer from rich people, I'll not say rich country. There is no more that. In the rich country, we have a lot of poor people. In the poor people, we have a lot of rich persons. Let's make a transfer, and the benefit will be to everyone. Because through education, basic education, we will have innovation. There's no way to have wonderful universities without basic education. And there's no way to have bad universities if we have a good basic education to everyone. This is what we have to do. To put the local experience in a global scale and to say to the world, the solution to our civilizational crisis is a good education for everybody.
Thank you so much, Senator. Ms. Rita Roy, innovative financing for development has to be a global partnership. What is missing in the current situation in terms of mobilizing support from different sectors to fund education for all?
Oh, that could be a very sensitive question. And I think I have one answer, and the word is trust. We're talking here about innovation in terms of both financing mechanisms as well as ideas which are innovative. But I think sometimes we also miss the point of something which is very basic, that collaboration also takes innovation. And the fundamentals of collaboration require a level of trust, a level of understanding, and ensuring that the different parties, and I still see in so many places, public sector and private sector, sometimes even within the private sector, we are speaking different languages. It's not that we're not all believers. We believe in that education, number one, it's a lifetime investment. That there is a direct correlation between an investment in education and economic growth. And we've seen that in countries like Korea, in Singapore, etc. But I think that we miss the point when we try to bring parties together, that we understand not just targets, but outcomes. We understand accountability and a level of transparency. And I think sometimes there's a tremendous amount of hesitation in coming together and investing huge amounts of money when we're not sure of the accountability. And we have enough case studies, unfortunately too many case studies there, of money not well spent and not effectively spent. So I think that's one very, very critical piece. I do think that this work, particularly with working with young people and investing in education with the purpose of connecting them to the economy so that young people can be productive and can contribute to the economy, and they can also be agents of change, particularly when we work with very, very marginalized young people. We need to make sure that in our partnerships that we don't make mistakes of the past, and that we engage young people not only in the design, oftentimes the delivery, and absolutely in the evaluation of these programs. Too often donors play God, unfortunately, and we don't listen. And we don't take the time to understand what really works and what can be operationalized on the ground. So I leave you with that thought around trust, innovation within the confines of collaboration, and listening at the end of the day to the ultimate beneficiary who we intend to support.
Thank you, Ms. Roy. Now that we've heard from our four panelists, Mr. Burnett, what's your perspective on that?
Thank you very much. I think it's extremely important to reinforce the points about targeting and effectiveness that we've heard in different ways. Targeting in terms of where the need is internationally. So Her Highness has referred to countries in or emerging from conflict. Or where the need is domestically, as Senator Boake has referred to the programs to improve the education of the poor, particularly in Brazil and in Mexico. And as Ms. Roy has mentioned with regard to youth and linking them up to the employment. But I do want to say just a word or two about the emerging ideas on innovative finance mechanisms, which I didn't mention at the beginning. Because with all respect to Ms. Bellamy, I think she was just slightly too dismissive of these ideas. There are perhaps 4 major types of idea out there. One is to do, as she implied, with bonds. So, of course, bonds aren't anything new, except they haven't been used much in education. And there's a lot of thinking going on about how you could issue bonds to support education, both internationally and domestically. Now, the key thing with a bond, of course, is who repays it. And so mechanisms can be thought about, such as do exist in the health sector, whereby bonds are issued and the repayments come out of aid flows. That's what happens with IFIM, which is a mechanism for immunizations. But they wouldn't have to come out of aid flows. They could come out of any flows that people would be willing to guarantee, foundations, new donors, etc. Another important type of bond has to do with diaspora bonds. These only work, of course, for countries which have large diasporas, like India. The second main mechanism is sort of consumer contributions. So when you came here, you came on a plane. And if you came from Europe, you probably didn't realize it, but you paid a tax. And that tax actually went to support the Global Fund for AIDS, TB, and malaria. You probably didn't realize any of that. And there's an idea of an international tax, which was promoted particularly by the French government, and it's a great pleasure to see them here today, and which has now had major international traction. A third area has to do with impact investing, and there are a lot, or value investing as it's known in more in Europe, impact investing in the US, the idea of private investors who want to get a financial return, not necessarily a big one, but also a social return. And there's a lot of potential mileage in that. And the fourth thing has to do with not so much things specifically for education, but making sure that education gets its share of anything new internationally. So there's a lot of talk, particularly in the wake of all the financial crises, about some sort of financial transactions tax internationally. And indeed, France, Spain, and Brazil have all endorsed this idea. So if that were to happen, and if some of the proceeds were to go towards development, we need to ensure that education gets its fair share of the proceeds from such a tax. So here are some of the mechanisms which are currently under discussion. None of them, except for the bonds, will probably be, and the financial transaction tax, can realistically raise huge amounts of money, but they can all make a difference, and they can also all help raise that profile, which can then also feed back and help encourage more conventional aid. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burnett. And now I would like to open the floor for discussion. I can see we have lots of interventions and questions. I would like to acknowledge also the presence of WISE Awards winners in the audience and remind everyone to please keep your interventions short so we can hear of many of you. And for our followers through WISE website, you can send your questions to Twitter. Again, it's #WiseMDG. My first question is for Ambassador Do, or your input, your intervention. Do you have a microphone? Please.
Thank you, Your Highness. Good to see you again. I just flew in from Namibia this morning, and I was there setting up my own little Thank You Small Library initiative, which I don't have to go out for funding because my government is good enough to fund all my projects. And listening all this distinguished 4 panelists, there's truth to what you have said. But I think we have to be very careful that we should not lump sum all developing countries in one. I travel to Africa 10 times a year to do my project, and each country that I visit are different. Just let me tell you about Namibia, Your Highness. There are like rural area, people come to the city, and they don't have housing, so they build a little tent house, and the children are overflowing. They want to come and study. But there are two things we should solve for them. So one, they have a morning class and afternoon class. So we have to expand facilities. And second, we have to feed them. I think one of your panelists said, if you don't get fed, then their parents will put them on the street to buy gums and this, to sell gums and this. So these are the case of Namibia. I see a couple of countries under this circumstance. So what I like to say is, the reason I'm here today is because your leadership, you're my boss in advocacy group. You're heading education. This is so wonderful that she leads, and all of us are here to discuss about that. And innovative financing, as Mr. Burnett said, yes, these things are working, not only education, but also the tourism industry too. Yes, it's very important. Education get its own share whenever this innovative international financing is possible. But what I'm trying to say is, nothing is too big, nothing is too small. You look at Korea. I'm Korean. Mr. Roy mentioned Korea. When I go to South Africa, they have at least notebooks and chairs. When I was little, right after Korean War, we didn't have chairs, we didn't have desk, we didn't have a notebook. We wrote on dirts with a stick. But we had a commitment. Government had education as priority number one. Parents felt that education is the most important thing after feeding children. And the children felt the only way we can get rid of the poverty, coming out from poverty, is education. So if you look at Korean case, we can share our experience with any country, anybody, if they're really willing to sit down and talk to us, because we started from nothing. And I think moderator's getting a little nervous that I might go
That's
any
very
further.
inspiring. Thank
Thank
you so much.
Your Highness, and for taking this lead. And as Mr. Barco, you said that perhaps we call this Doha Initiative or something. So let's do something about with wise community. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador.
May I say something,
Sure.
please? I just want to remind the audience here and my colleagues that we all know the importance of education. We are not here to discuss the importance of education. This panel is about innovative financing in education. I agree with Carol. Innovative financing worked in health, worked in all sectors. It's time now to apply them in education. So that's why we are here really to discuss and brainstorm new ways, new means for innovative financing in education.
Very good point. Thank you, Your Highness. And I would like to hear now from Ms. Rodi Kratza Zagaropoulou. She's the Vice President of the EU Parliament. Ms. Rodi, is she in the room? May I ask you to stand up, please? Ms. Rodi. Okay, I guess she's not here. Well, let's hear, before I give you the microphone for interventions, from one of the students in Kara Foundation, Ghanem Slaty. Your own input. Ghanem.
Hello everyone, my name is Ghanem Al-Sulaiti and I'm studying in Carnegie Mellon University in Education City here in Qatar. I would like to express that we students think that we have the opportunity to contribute in this issue, but we lack of guidance. We think that we can share our finance and business background to contribute, but I would like to take the opportunity to hear from the panel or anyone in the audience about their experience in directing us to contribute in such projects and issues. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Who's going to answer this? Okay, let's give him the microphone, please. No? Comments, okay. We'll take your comments and then we'll answer your question.
Yeah.
You're next.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Your Highness. One of the issues that I wanted to raise today regarding innovation and the way we are trying to finance education is very much coming from social entrepreneurship. I am a fellow of Ashoka.
Can you state your name, please, and
Hilda
organization?
Darles.
Organization, what?
Center for Research in Ethical Development.
Thank you, because we're documenting all your interventions.
And one of the issues that we found, especially with Ashoka, is that we are not communicating to each other. People who are making innovations in education are working in isolation, and when we try to reach financial help, what you were saying is very true, trust is not there. Then we work with the academics, and the academics have their own agenda. We work with politics, and they have their own agenda, and we are talking different languages in here. So what's happening is that we are not joining efforts, and by not doing that, we are spending our money in issues that have been addressed for centuries or for years and are not necessarily bringing results in different areas. So we need to start talking to each other. We need to start really joining efforts and try to find what is the innovation out there that we can bring into the equation in order to really put the finance where it has to be.
Thank you so much. Can I ask you to give the microphone to, yes, sir, your name,
hello.
organization.
My name is Marwan Tarazi from Birzeit University in Palestine. The question I asked, when we're trying to address education, I mean, it was very interesting. Everybody was saying something interesting in different areas. The question is, which education are we trying to support? I mean, we know there are a lot of educational models around the world, and a lot of those models are failing, and we see them happening. And we're seeing that a lot of talk about innovative models in education here, and then we know that these new models is what it's going to take to change the current educational system. This is how we're going to get students to learn. So it brings the question, do we want to keep investing in the old models, in the old systems, or do we want to use that, innovative financing for innovation? So you need the innovation in the financing, and I think we need to finance the innovative models. And this is where fora like this one, or the financing here comes to do something new on the ground and to support innovation in education. I mean, after all, for example, if we talk about the private sector typically everybody thinks about them as financiers or people who want to give money. But I think in an innovative model, private sector could become a community that would support education through engaging students, through the on-the-job training, through this kind of work. So it doesn't only have to involve finance. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Who would like to answer his question? Ms. Roy, go ahead.
So actually, I want to connect several of the points. I think to the ambassador's point, absolutely, we need to look at Africa within context. So we're working in 20 countries on the continent, and you do need to look at realities on the ground. In terms of innovative financing or financing innovation in education, we're looking at a number of things, and you're right, they're out there, they're small. We're looking at self-financing schools. We're looking at microfinance mechanisms to do long-term financing, which is so counterintuitive. We are looking at ways to make vocational education centers much more market relevant. And we're looking at education and training, which is much more demand driven in terms of connecting young people, particularly unemployed young people, underemployed young people, directly to employers for entry-level jobs. So there is a vast amount of experimentation which is happening. It's on a small scale. One of the great challenges for all of us is to create the evidence base so that we, with the intention of scale. To the woman Hilda who was talking about Ashoka and the work around social innovation, one of the things which we're doing right now for Africa specifically is putting competitive money out there. It's about $6 million to really look at how can people, and just to incent innovative, different mindset thinking about how we can create jobs, but not jobs in the sense of public works jobs alone, but really looking at employment opportunities, some of it, frankly, driven by young people. And to your point about how young people can be better connected, we are learning so much directly from young people because they are wired and they are connected. We're looking at innovations which with applications on mobile phones where employers can put a job description on an SMS, and a young person, and this is happening in Palestine, can actually SMS their CV. So it's all about a mindset switch to get to innovation in education.
Thank you. I would remind you just please to keep your interventions short. Okay, and answer one point at each time, please. I can see a lot of people wants to contribute. Senator Barke, go ahead.
Okay. First of all, I agree that we have to connect young people, but we have to connect the young people to school. Today, they are disconnected because school is not good to young people. We did not change school for the last 200 years. Media is different, banking is different, transportation is different. School is the same almost. We have to innovate school, innovate, change. It's a new kind of teacher, a new kind of equipment. And to do the innovation in school is a necessary way to do the innovation in society through school. And regarding other questions, I do not see how can we do that only with local money, for example, in Africa. We need a global effort. How, Highness? We need to tax, as some people are proposing, like a Tobin tax, for example, but with a commitment to education. It's commitment. Family's commitment is the basis of everything. But without money, the family commitment will not success. Then we need global money to local education. How to do that? We have $80 billion of the national global product or income. We have more than 1,000 trillion in financial transfer. We have 1 trillion 500 billion just in weapons trade. We can't tax that. Let me say that the global national is not 80 billion, it's $80 trillion. Why not to tax that, but say this money will go to a fund, and this fund will go to education. I think this can be the solution for the global civilizational crisis that we have.
Okay.
It's not easy to do the engineering, but at least it's an idea.
Sure, Your Highness.
Going to the point of innovation education, I think a lot being said about innovation education, so it's obvious now to everyone that we need different kind of education. And one idea that came to my mind while you were talking, that maybe we should link incentives to the innovation in educations. So we should not finance any kind of education now. Education that applies of today's time, not of yesterday's time. We cannot afford any more producing children that cannot fit the market. It's not just, and when we talk to the innovation education, we don't mean only that education that linked to the market. I think we are talking about education that build this critical thinking in our students' mind and flexibility, because they have to be flexible in a rapidly changing market. Today's jobs are going to be different tomorrow and after tomorrow. So we have to have those kids ready to be adaptable to the rapidly changing market. So it's important really to build this critical thinking in their minds and flexibility and adaptability to the environments that we are, the working environments that are changing all the time.
Thank you, Your Highness. I will take an intervention from the lady here, and then I'll give you the word.
Thank you very much, Your Highness. My name is Martina Roth from Intel Corporation, and I'm very happy to be invited to this meeting. First and foremost, I would like to speak for the private sector that there's one item perhaps to be added to the discussion, and this is value. A lot of things have been talked about, finance and investment, but at the end of the day, what the most important is the value that we are bringing. Alone, our company is spending $100 million a year in education, but the value is way bigger just because we are collaborating with different players, starting with governments, but also with NGOs, etc. I would like actually to build on what Dr. Bellamy said before, leading the Global Partnership for Education. Because clearly, in the moment we collaborate, we have a way bigger impact, a way bigger value that we are bringing collectively. And the approach she took when she reorganized the former FGI, but now Global Partnership for Education, was that she was inviting proactively the private sector and the foundation to form one constituency and to be on her governing board. That is, for me, role modeling a new innovative approach. And we, in fact, are talking with foundations how to approach this best. being in a company that has a foundation and corporate affairs in the company really addressing education, I must say that to me and for many of my colleagues in this constituency, this is the approach to take. Perhaps one aspect that has not been mentioned, but I know all of you on the panel, especially Your Highness and Dr. Bellamy, are very supportive on girls and women, and the importance of focusing on those. Perhaps a couple of words on what you are planning to do here and with the different partners. Thank you.
Because we're focusing today on financing, so I think
I
that's
understand.
why. But
Okay.
okay, I'll take some more interventions. Do you have a microphone? You don't have one, please. Coming back to you. Thank you. Almost everyone has interventions, so please keep it short. Tfaddal.
Yes. Your Highness, Sheikh Hamouza, pleasure to see you again. My question is, since we're talking about accountability and trust in financing, first of all, my name is Amro Khater. I'm from Business Learning Institute. It's management education company. Why don't we form a committee or a group of people, selective, distinguished people, headed by Qatar Foundation, to examine issues that has to do with accountability and trust. And this could be endorsed by an international body that can have to say if someone, a project or a country that is not doing proper spending, could then a decision could be made that this is not the right project or the right fund, and then we can solve this issue, we can solve this problem. So a committee that examines issues that has to do with accountability and trust, and this could be a force that makes sure that every project is handled in the right way. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I think when I mentioned KPI, the key performance indicators, trust and accountability should be one of those indicators.
Okay. Okay, I can see a microphone. Okay, go ahead, and then you are next, please.
Hi. First of all, my name is Lori Henninger. I'm with the Interagency Network for Education in Emergencies. I would like to very much thank the panel, and particularly Sheikh Hamouza, for your focus on education in conflict situations, and to Carol for the new mechanisms within the global partnership. I think that it's not an innovative mechanism, but one of the areas that desperately needs attention around financing is in the gap between humanitarian financing during conflict situations and development finance that happens at some time later. Education can't stop during a conflict or a crisis. And one of the things that I would like to charge this community with thinking about is, what are the mechanisms that can be developed to bridge that gap between humanitarian and development financing for education?
Thank you so much. Yes, okay.
2
I
points.
promise you're next.
I'm sorry. I know. 2 points. One from before. I wasn't suggesting that the so-called innovative financing mechanisms for health didn't work. They did. We should use them. They're just nothing new and fancy. They worked. The point is, so much attention has been put on those that there's been too little attention put on conventional financing and how to more effectively use conventional financing. So what we're doing is the tail is wagging the dog rather than looking at how you take the greater bulk of financing and use it in a more innovative way. Secondly, what we have to do partly in dealing with emergencies is there's this incredible gap between what's considered to be emergency and what's considered to be development. And education has always sat in the development drawer and never in the emergency drawer, even though health sits in both. But there is nothing more important for a child than some normalcy in an otherwise abnormal situation, which means that education has to continue even in the midst of crisis. And to me, ultimately, we haven't gotten there yet, but what covers that gap is that you never make that distinction between humanitarian and development. You understand that education as a development investment has to go on in the emergency. Because if it isn't, who ultimately, when peace comes, or something that looks like peace, who will be the future leaders? Where are those young people in the future who will lead that country if they haven't had an education? So we have got to change the mindset of funders to understand that education in emergencies is development. It's not just an emergency response.
Thank you. Please.
Merci. Merci, Votre Majesté, Son Altesse.
Thank you,
J'interviens au nom du
Your
ministre
Highness.
gabonais
I'm intervening on behalf
de
of the
l'Éducation nationale,
Gabon
l'enseignement supérieur, de la
Minister
recherche
of
scientifique, de
Education, Higher
l'innovation
Education,
et de la culture.
Scientific
du Gabon,
Research,
Son Excellence, Monsieur
and
Séraphin
Scientific Research,
Mundunga.
Mr.
Très
Serafin
rapidement,
Mundunga.
Une question ou
Is it a
Une
question?
petite intervention pour
D'accord.
dire ce qui se passe
Short
au
intervention
Gabon
is saying
en
what
termes
is happening in
d'innovation
Gabon
du
in
système
terms of
éducatif. Cette
innovation of
innovation,
the
ces
educational
réformes
system.
portent un nom.
This
Les États
innovation,
généraux
this reform
de
has a
l'éducation,
title,
de la
the
formation
headquarters,
et de l'adéquation
general
formation-emploi,
situation of
organisé par le président de la République
employment
Ali Bongo
reform
Ondimba, du 17 au
organized
18
by the
mai
President of the
2010.
Republic from the
Ces états généraux, cette
from the
innovation
17th to the
porte
18th of
deux
May
principes.
2010.
Le premier
This
principe,
innovation
c'est
bears
effectivement
two
la
principles.
modernisation
First,
et la
modernization and
démocratisation du système
democratization
éducatif
of the
gabonais.
educational
Deuxième
system in
principe,
Gabon.
c'est la
The second
vocation
principle is
scientifique,
the
technologique
scientific
et
vocation
professionnalisante du système
and
éducatif
professionalizing
gabonais.
education
Au niveau
of
des
the
valeurs, il y a
educational
quelques
system.
valeurs, notamment
In
les
terms
valeurs de
of
citoyenneté,
values,
des valeurs de l'environnement, l'intérêt de
values of
l'environnement, de
citizenship, the
solidarité
interest
et de
of the
mérite.
environment,
Quelques
solidarity,
actions
and merit.
innovantes
Some
apportées par le chef de
innovative
l'État.
actions
On
are
peut-
given
on peut
by
dire-
the
on
heads
peut
of
parler,
states.
par exemple, de
We can
l'introduction
talk,
de
for
la
instance, about
généralisation
the
du système
introduction
primaire.
of the
On peut
generalization and
parler de
universalization
l'introduction dans le
of
système
the
éducatif des nouvelles technologies
pre-primary school
de
systems,
l'information et de la
and
communication.
also the universalization
Donc,
of the
je termine
ICT.
par rapport au financement dont on parle
I
ici.
conclude
Et je
concerning
voudrais
the
féliciter,
financing, and I would
le
like to
gouvernement
congratulate
qatari
the
d'avoir
Qatari
passé un
government
projet
for
d'accord à
having
Libreville pour un financement
signed
de
an
tout
agreement
ce
at
système
Libreville for the
éducatif
financing
dont
of
le
all
coût est de
the
près de
educational system
4
of a value
milliards
of
de
$4
dollars.
billion.
Et je termine tout simplement
And
pour
I
vous
conclude very
informer
simply
que
by
vous avez
informing
à la
you
sortie
that
les
at the
exemplaires
exit
des
you
états
have
généraux du rapport
the
général.
report summary.
Ah, d'accord.
Merci
Bon,
beaucoup,
merci.
monsieur.
Merci de votre
The facilitator is intervening. This was a publicity, not an intervention.
My name is Michael Barber. I'm Chief Education Advisor of Pearson and also DFID's Special Representative on Education in Pakistan. I just want to pick up Her Highness's point about education in conflict zones and say two things. One is in Pearson we're hoping to set up a fund shortly that will invest, I use the word advisedly given that we're talking about financing models, in private and not-for-profit and public-private partnerships that are providing innovative solutions to education for the poorest families in the world. And secondly, to relate that specifically to the conflict zone, in a conflict zone, by definition, the government is unable, the traditional sort of aid relationship, the traditional government provision is not going to function. And so I think what is needed here is some challenge funding where combinations of people around the world can maybe enter a competition to get funding to solve some of these education problems in the immediate emergencies of conflict, but also in the long periods where a conflict might be swirling around, but without proper provision, children are not being educated. And I think a sort of global challenge fund along those lines would be a good step forward.
Well, the government usually is part of the conflict.
Yeah, so exactly. So the bidders would not be
Yes.
the bidders would not be the governments. The
Okay.
bidders would be a range
Yes.
of other providers.
We'll take answers or more interventions. What do you prefer? Okay, more interventions. Microphones, please.
I'm Maha Barada from Euronews. When we speak about innovation in education and in financing, maybe we should also think about the political will to do this, specifically now in the Arab Spring countries where there are emerging democracies. Do you think that now is the time to invest in the innovation of education and the financing in these particular countries?
Okay.
Yes,
question?
for Your Highness, sorry.
I think it is the right time. I think the society is starting from fresh. They are discarding all the the past with its flaws. New governments, new leaders, comprises many from youth. are ready to accept and to adapt new ways of education. And they've been, I think, the best evidence of what could good quality education bring. We have seen that those people, the old revolutions and all demonstrations in the Arab world were led by educated people, not just any educated people, but highly educated people, and who got quality education in private schools and highly prestigious universities. So I believe that it's time now. We cannot afford going back to the long traditional way of learning and educating. We have to really to make sure that what we are applying in terms of methodologies and pedagogies are meeting the needs and the requirements of the young minds that, as you said, now they are using those social medias way. They will not accept any kind of traditional ways of learning anymore.
Thank you, Your Highness. Please.
Your Highness, my name is Mehul Sangrachka from Learning Possibilities in the UK. Can I also congratulate you and thank you for your vision and leadership in the field of education? In a lot of the projects that I've been involved in, the financing that goes into developing countries is around building infrastructure or providing technology. And these are long-term complex procurements which rarely seem to produce the results we all hope they would. And perhaps what we should do in terms of financing mechanisms is to think about building capacity not in the recipient countries, but perhaps in the donor countries. Yesterday, for example, we heard about the plight of so many people in the region, young people who are educated, IT literate, motivated, but have to wait 2 to 3 years to get a job. And if there was a way to mobilize them, to give them a year's experience in teaching in these developing countries, it would greatly benefit them and bring capacity into those countries immediately. And young people we know today don't need training on IT, they don't need to know about new methods of learning, they do all of these things. So we will bring a new type of education with a formula like this.
Thank you. Thank you. Please, the microphone.
Thank you. I'm Mohammed Al-Amin At-Tom, Garden City College for Science and Technology, Khartoum, Sudan. I would like to use my few minutes to make a special appeal.
There are two, not few. 2 minutes.
2 minutes. Yes, to make a passionate appeal on behalf of a nation that has just emerged from a 40-year-long war. It's the longest war that's known in the history of, in our history, recent history. It's South Sudan. And I know many of the participants here, especially Her Highness, Ms. Bellamy, Professor Sachs, they know the details of the enormous challenges that this nascent nation, is the 193rd nation, that faces in the area of education. In fact, according to the Global Monitoring Report, South Sudan, with a population of 8 million, I might remind you, has the worst indicators for education in the world. For instance, 1.3 million children are out of school. Less than 1% of girls are complete primary school. The last grade of secondary school has only 400 girls. Ratio of pupils to qualified teachers, 100 to 1, and in some states it's 200 to 1. And one can go on and on with these very dire statistics.
Do you have any question?
My question is, well, I started by saying to make an appeal. I want not a question, but people should just try to reflect for a while on the magnitude of these challenges. But if I might make one recommendation twice, perhaps to think, perhaps in the spirit of the Haiti Task Force, about assisting South Sudan. Thank you.
Thank you so much. The gentleman over there, please.
Thank you. Alan Goodman, Institute of International Education. Your Highness, lovely to see you. When the Fulbright program was created in 1946, it was through amending the Lend-Lease and War Debt Acts of Britain, America, France, Italy. Is there an analogous to today where we could forgive debt but not throw it away, but set it aside in an education fund, requiring governments to put the debt into a fund that would build education as it did Fulbright.
Thank you. Thank you so much. The lady here with black. I can see so many hands, but we're really running out of time.
Thank you.
So please
Thank
make
you,
it short.
Hannes.
Thank you.
Jumana Oude, Palestine. I'm a Palestinian Happy Child Center. I would suggest if we can combine health with education, because it's very effective to look more attractive. Like why? I mean, with the anemic child can't focus on his anemia or malnutrition. Why not for pharmaceutical companies like the companies with the iron who provide iron? Why don't they pay for that? For the gentleman here, the student, I would suggest to volunteer to advocate for education. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, you, please stand up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Fani de Toey, Institute for Justice and Reconciliation in South Africa. I'm also delighted with the focus on conflict zones, Your Highness. I think it's extremely important. One question, I think if we talk about innovative mechanisms, we should also talk about innovative partnerships. And I think one of the lack of discernment that I detect in the allocation of international funding in conflict zones is on indigenous civic society that is both capacitated and has the analytical knowledge and capacity, but also is accepted by the local population as teachers and educators. Because it is quite a question, who does one allow to educate you? And I think if I could just suggest that we also pay attention to who the money goes to as the actors. And in the current financial situation, civil society in Africa is actually being decimated. Thank you.
I need to remind you here that we're gathering all your thoughts and they will be documented and disseminated through WISE website. One last intervention, I guess, from the lady over here. Okay.
Hello, my name is Shahinaz Ahmed, and I'm with the Education for Employment Foundation in Egypt. Just one comment in terms of financing. After the revolution in Egypt, there were numerous entities that came to the country with a lot of money, wanting to work in education and employment, and various other areas as well. And a lot of them would come and say, we've got $1 million, we've got $5 million, what should we do? One of the challenges is how broken up this funding is and how unaligned it is. So the question I have to the panel is, how can we make sure that this kind of funding in a country like Egypt after the revolution is aligned and is directed towards something strategic?
Thank you so much. So now we're coming to the end of this session. I'm going to ask each of the panelists 1 minute only. I'll start with you, Ms. Roy.
Just closing thoughts?
Yes.
Well, I will talk about trust, the gentleman's point earlier about governance, and to the comment about young people being deployed, what you were really talking about is a teach corps, a global teach corps. And that would be very, very exciting. So thank you.
Senator Barker.
Just to comment the gentleman here about a group to think about tax and accountability. I would say tax, accountability, and the design of the new school to the world. The last job about that was Monsieur Delors, 30 years ago. We need a new school. We need to innovate school, to have school innovating society. Then I would like to support your recommendation with one more word, the design of the new school.
Thank you. I also need to say that we have many questions from Twitter, and you can still ask your questions and your intervention on WISE. You can send it all to WISE website. The question from Twitter is focusing on areas of conflict and bringing business methods to education are two ways to help achieve more progress towards MDG 2. Are there others? Ms. Bellamy.
Let me just say, I've been, along with Nick, to endless meetings on innovative financing for education. This is the first one that actually began to connect the dots across from the financing tools to there is financing, but how do we use it better, to there is innovation, and where do we find the financing for it? So I think this is the first meeting I have some really optimism about this.
That's good.
Two other quick, Alan, there is some capacity, limited, but some capacity to do some debt financing out there. And in terms of pharmaceuticals and education, for example, just as an example, and I'm sure there are others, Merck is doing some provision of deworming in conjunction with education systems. So you have the deworming coming on. So there are two sides of the coin. The malnourished child can't study. The child who has an education but is sick. The other side. On the other hand, we know education reduces under 5 mortality. So health and education are related. I just, again, I'll conclude by saying, finally, we're starting to connect the broader dots here, and I think there is much potential for the ideas that come out of this meeting.
Your Highness, I will conclude with you in just a minute. Mr. Burnett.
Thank you. I think it's very hard to sort of summarize this whole discussion, so I won't try, but maybe just 3 points. One is, I think actually we're talking about 3 things. Innovative financing, which, as Carol says, may not be innovative overall, but is certainly innovative for education and needs to be applied. And there are many mechanisms that are being developed and which need some support to get them further developed, including a debt swap mechanism, actually, as was raised by the gentleman from IAE. But the problem with the debt swap mechanism is it would essentially have to be for middle-income countries, because most of the low-income countries don't have much debt left due to earlier debt relief efforts. So there's a targeting question. So that actually leads me to the second point, which is, first point, innovative financing. Second point, effective spending. That, I think, is what we've been talking about here. So that has many aspects. Targeting, which I already referred to. Going for what works, which many of you referred to, business methods, conditional cash transfers, non-state in certain circumstances, particularly, obviously, conflict, combining with health, especially for young children, as somebody suggested, these sorts of things. The third thing is what's needed. So the first is, targeting where. Second is what works. The third is what's needed. That's the innovation, invest in the innovation. And the fourth, which so many people have said in different ways, is the accountability. And there is a lot of work needed there. And there's a lot of interesting stuff going on, by the way, with regard to civil society monitoring of public spending, but and to a lesser extent of international flows. But the key is to monitor on the ground in the countries. And the third big thing, the first was innovative financing, the second effective spending, and the third, I think, which we've been talking about here, is effective partnerships. And several have referred to the great work being done by Carol to sort of change the nature of the partnership, of the Global Partnership for Education. But there's need to do this in other ways and in other places also, as we have heard from several people with the recent comment about the influx of funds for Egypt coming in, but in an uncoordinated way. But there's a need for these partnerships to be made much more effective. And there are, again, unfortunately, for us in education, some pretty good examples from health that we probably need to pay attention to. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Burnett. Your Highness, your concluding thoughts.
Thank you. First of all, I want to say that I am very excited about our discussions here today. I'm sure that those ideas and thoughts will be gathered and will be considered. And I would like to also to say from this podium that I'm going to try as much as I can and very systematic way to have WISE or to work with WISE that would be more focused on MDG 2. So I want WISE really to be around MDG 2. And we will try to do that through several ways. As we started this time, we are going to have side sessions through certain theme of MGD2 that will focus the discussions and will enable us to get some concrete outcomes. Those concrete outcomes hopefully will be taken seriously by attendees of WISE and will be transformed into projects and ways to implement them. After that, we will dedicate one of the 6 WISE awards to those achievements for the MDG 2. So next year, by 2012, will award MDG 2 award, WISE award, for the best achievement in financing or innovative financing. And that will continue every year. Every year will have different theme, and every year will have different award for different theme that are in line with our objectives. And I think I just want to say that I'm very optimistic. I know that we can do it together through a global partnership. We'll be able to achieve our goals, not just for the MDG2, but for the lifelong education for all of us.
Thank you so much, Your Highness. Thank you. That's very promising and inspiring. And I think when people like you, experts and passionate people for education from all walks of life, come together and think and explore and innovate, I think there will be no obstacles too difficult to overcome. And thank you again, Your Highness, to make all this possible. Thank you. See you next year.